Please allow me to reintroduce myself for those of you who were late this morning, who just joined us. My name is Ypatios Moysiadis. I'm the Business Development Director of Greensolver. And what I'm going to talk to you about today is asset optimization. Buzzword, everybody's talking about it. But what we did is we've developed a very specific process and approach on how we see asset optimization and why asset optimization is important. So before I dive into the slides, I would like you to allow me to introduce Greensolver to you, which is in the UK a new asset management technical advisory company, especially on the solar. We have a huge pipeline of projects under management in wind, but we are working with solar across Europe. And in the core, what we do, and people are often asking us why you do what you do is, or what you do is we create environmental and financial value, and that's really summarizing what Greensolver is all about. Some quick figures. Greensolver is an independent technical expert. We operate in 9 countries across Europe. We have 5 office locations. We serve, we have 3 main services: the operation, technical, and commercial asset management, the construction management, and the advisory consultancy. We have 45 people within our team, including health and safety and HV experts. I think we are one of the few companies that they have 4 different quality certifications. And we also have an in-house innovation team which develops specific products which offer incremental innovation like benchmarking, availability, measuring capacity in wind farms, and so on and so forth. This is our exposure across Europe. So mostly concentrated on wind, but we are growing on solar as well, 1.35 gigawatts under management at the moment. And also providing advisory services and construction management services across the globe. So, before we start talking about the actual asset optimization, it would be useful, I think, to start looking at some current market trends. So I've split those in two sections, the negative and the positive. Starting with the negative and going back to what we were discussing this morning, I would like to raise your attention to 2 specific points. One is that we see some serious issues with major parts like solar panels. We see much faster degradation of performance than initially designed and expected. I think that some of you in the room can justify that from their own research. Perhaps you can back that up. And also, another point that I've made this morning, that we haven't lost this kind of opportunistic mindset. We still build things, pressured by deadlines, and not taking into consideration the 20 or 25-year life cycle of the assets. On the positive side, we see a global opportunity, and we will see the numbers in the next slides. But also, I see a continuous consolidation, and I think this is a beneficial situation for the sector, and I will explain why. So global investments, these figures I've taken from BNEF, so thank you, Jenny and team, for that. So here we can see a clear decline in clean tech and clean investment by technology, especially if we start looking at the solar and wind. We can see a major difference between 2017 and 2018. And we see pretty much no other investment, or very, very, very small investments in all other technologies. Looking at the global investment per region, we see that the Americas and the Asian Pacific has been slowing down. We haven't seen such a dramatic drop in Europe, Middle East, and Africa. But we could say that perhaps this is due to this kind of drop in total investment is due to reduced capex. On slide 9, we have a snapshot of the UK. And as you can see, we have pretty much zero investment in solar in 2018. How sad is that? I think that we've been preoccupied with discussions of Brexit over the last 2 years, and the lack of clear guidance and clear policy making has affected the industry so much. And whatever we see in the wind sector is actually driven by legacy projects that, due to capex reduction, were allowed to come alive, or they will be driven by utilities that essentially they have a different kind of market outlook for them. We were discussing about wholesale prices as well. I would like to raise your attention at the two bottom graph or lines that they represent the wholesale prices. And we see that there is a downward trend. The whole prices are at the moment just above the $50 per megawatt hour. But we expect that this kind of downward trend will continue as more renewables will be deployed. And why is this important? Because this has a direct effect in your PPAs. However, on the positive side, and if we would like to embrace the figures from Bloomberg, by 2050 we would see that solar and wind and the renewables will be about 64% of the total global mix. So what we've been doing up until now, it's a it's a beginning. We are the early adopters. So the potential for the industry is still there. And with the pressure about environmental issues, I've watched online the speech from Sir Attenborough in Poland, and it was really inspirational. So the time for us to continue persevering ahead is now. But why are we discussing about asset optimization? How do we see the industry growing? What is the problem? For me, the problem is that the sector hasn't reached a critical scale yet. If you compare ourselves to oil and gas, if you compare ourselves to nuclear, if you compare ourselves with other industries, we don't have the scale yet to influence things. And why scale is critical? Only through scale we can reach sustainable growth. And also, discussing from the morning again, find perhaps the right efficiencies. It's funny when we're discussing about 300 or 500 or 900 megawatts, but start thinking about 4 gigawatts, 6 gigawatts. Also, it's only through scale that we can start increasing our net asset value, or the net asset value of our portfolios, and also influence how the government is treating us. It's only through scale that we can actually have cheaper access to cheaper capital. Because your investors are actually people that they want to invest money, and they have to choose between us as an industry and something else. So the bigger we are, the more attractive we are to the individual investors. And you can start breaking down into different kind of categories. You can start breaking down things on, from a point of view of an investment manager, from a point of view of an investor themselves, from an IPPs, or what is the issue with regulation? Because what we want a level playing field with everybody else. So we believe that asset optimization might not be the only solution, but it's definitely a big part of the solution. Why? Because essentially it provides a convincing, measurable, visible answer to the issues and the questions raised. Now, before we start going into the process, we should keep these 7 points in mind. First of all, we are always talking about plans and power plants and this and that and the other. We're actually running businesses. And we're not the first to rediscover the wheel. So we can actually look at other industries and see what kind of best practices they've implemented. Like, for example, the software industry. Or looking at closer industries than solar, like wind. So we also need to start thinking that one size doesn't fit all. One O&M policy, one asset management policy, one contract cannot fit everything. And we should start looking at performance optimization and value increase through clarity. One of the things that has been raising constantly is lack of transparency and clarity of data. So our challenge, and if you would like, you've got a linear kind of approach from the field of the asset of the O&M all the way to the asset owner, and the information flows on a linear way. And somehow, during this kind of linear process, information gets lost. Or we end up in a situation that the asset owner gets a very filtered information or data analysis. So, going into the 6-point approach, looking at how we can actually optimize an asset, we came up with an approach that touches different aspects of the life cycle or the asset themselves. So going from plant performance all the way to people. And people, which is the last point but not the least, is something that we keep on forgetting. There is a lot of movement, a lot of lost knowledge in the sector. We don't really care, we don't really take care of our people. And because the prices are very thin and the margins are very thin, we tend to pressurize our people or overwork them. But is this the right kind of approach? So let's look at these kind of points individually. Starting with plant performance. When we discuss about plant performance, essentially we're talking about a circular active management, which provides transparent and live dissemination of data. That means that the asset owner gets exactly the same kind of information as the O&M and everybody and everyone else in the service provision. We're talking about availability and performance increase, and perhaps start thinking about things like resolution time as a new KPI. Start looking at active spare management, which is a huge issue right now on the wind side. Now, one of the main issues that the wind sector is facing, even in the UK, is spare part availability. And we will reach that kind of point, not that far to the future. Second point is about operation cost reduction. So we can start adopting best practices. We can start coordinating with the grid and the DNOs by future-proofing our sites. We need to start looking at how we can optimize contracts, moving away from all wrapped contracts, not moving away, that's a discussion that we have. And I think that all ancillary services will have to start being delivered on a monetary basis. Up until now, we just had trends. Oh, it has to be cut, the grass has to be cut once a year. Oh, we're gonna do one cleaning of panels a year. So let's stop having that kind of discussion, and let's start basing our decisions on pure data. And then a couple of other things that will come up perhaps later on today. Physical security, break-in on sites. What do we do about it? The insurance are going crazy with that. And also cybersecurity, because our sites are actually open to cyber attacks. And again, this is a lesson from the wind industry that we need to start thinking about. Then we've got the third point, which is financial restructuring, and you can all understand what that means. We need to start recalculating the acquisition base case based on real data, on real historic data. The debt restructuring and refinancing is something that you already do. It's an exercise that a lot of the asset owners have been already hard on. And also looking at your PPA. Your PPA strategy is going to be, are you going to be hedging on the short term? Are you going to be looking at the long term fixed price? and how does that, digression of the wholesale prices affect that? And also, I think, Wolfgang, you touched on that, identification of non-critical income streams. It could be payments for land management, it could be whatever, it could be payments for carbon rights, who knows? Legal and contractual negotiations. Your biggest contract, your most valuable contract, for me personally, is your lease. So how can we start renegotiating the lease and start extending the lease, perhaps to meet the expectation or the new expectations of the life cycle of the projects? Also penalties. Right now, you've got assets that are being penalized for being switched off by PPA providers or by the grid. So we need to start looking at that. We need to start looking at any kind of new regulations that might affect contractually your assets and your income. And also something that we should consider is data storage and usage, because the data you have has value. Now, right now, nobody is touching that kind of value. And we are looking at data very superficially. We've got this kind of buzzwords about AI and advanced data analytics, and I would agree with Paolo that we've seen very few companies that they are actually working very hard on that. And also manufacturing insurance contracts. We've seen a lot of discussions about claims on panels, but a lot of these kind of panel manufacturers have gone out of business. How valuable is an insurance contract or with a panel manufacturer right now? Something to think of. Technology adaptation is pretty much straightforward. For me, the most critical thing here is data harmonization and connectivity. So you've got tens of parks worldwide, different locations, different monitoring systems, different data systems, different comms. How do you start harmonizing this data and actually translating them in a way that makes financial sense? And last but not least, touching on the point that I've made earlier about people, I see two different drivers here, an external driver and an internal driver. So is essentially my bottom line here is treat your employees as they should be treating your business, your asset. So the more engaged you are with your employees, the more training you provide, let's say a clear path with professional development, the more engaged they will be with your asset, and they will demonstrate responsibility and ownership, which is essential. And also you've got the external part, which is engaging with the local communities, actively speaking with the landlords that we've seen Foresight and others actively doing, but also demonstrating that we are good and efficient stewards of the land to all stakeholders. And now we are reaching a point that is for me a very kind of simple equation. How do we reach asset value maximization? Well, it's very simple, and it's pretty much like any other business. You reduce your cost and you increase your revenue. How do you increase your revenue? By looking at your generation and maximizing your exports, and also optimizing your PPA. And how do you reduce costs? You look at the financial and tax optimization and any kind of service contracts that you can renegotiate. Managing expectations. What can we do about, if we go through this kind of process, what can we expect? We've calculated that the expected benefit is between 3 to 5% if you go through the whole process. We can break that down individually if you want, but essentially, if you go through the whole process, this is what you can expect as an improvement to your asset IRR. Now, some next steps. We might have different views, but the reality is that we need to start approaching asset management on a very systematic basis. We don't have the luxury not to. We need to do two things. We need to embrace and implement optimization strategies, and also start looking at innovation and innovative solutions. Some two very good examples. Verve, that I think they've worked on peer-to-peer blockchain, and also EnergyBit, which, as far as I know, it's the first company that offer monitoring-only services. So they disseminate that kind of information from the site all the way to the asset owner. So call to action, guys. We need to recognize the need, start planning now, and please call us to support and guide you. And to leave you with some thoughts. The reality is that we start discussing about renewable energy, but we still will start discussing about energy. When you have Statoil investing about $1 billion a year in wind, then is it renewable energy or is it energy? It's about survival, and we need to scale up. We need to be able to compete with oil and gas and the other mainstream energy industries. And at the end of the day, if we want to democratize and decentralize energy and actually making a serious impact on the environment, we need to survive, we need to evolve, and it's down to us because we are the pioneers, we are the early adapters. So thank you very much for your attention.